Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call attention to the government of Ethiopia's continued pattern of repression and violence against its own people. And I urge the House of Representatives to vote on House Resolution 128, the supporting respect for human rights and encouraging inclusive governance in Ethiopia resolution. This resolution calls on the government of Ethiopia to take clear, decisive steps towards becoming more inclusive, more democratic, and more respectful of the basic human rights of its own people. This resolution has overwhelming bipartisan support with more than 70 co-sponsors, and it passed out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee unanimously on July 27th. The ongoing human rights crisis in Ethiopia is extremely troubling to me. To the resolutions and other co-sponsors, to the many Americans of Ethiopian heritage, and to numerous human rights groups, I firmly believe that the passage of this resolution will encourage the Ethiopian government to end its practice of violence and repression and provide a strong basis of an inclusive government. Specifically, this resolution condemns the excessive use of force by Ethiopian security forces and the killing of peaceful protesters, the arrest and detention of journalists, students, activists, and political leaders, and the Ethiopian government's abuse of the anti-terrorism proclamation to stifle political and civil dissent. The resolution does not simply highlight the Ethiopian government's increasingly authoritarian acts, but it also encourages the United States to support efforts to improve democracy and governance in Ethiopia. I believe that the United States can take actions that will positively influence the Ethiopian government and use our existing institutions to further democracy and effective governance in Ethiopia. Critically, the resolution calls on the Ethiopian government to admit UN human rights observers so they can conduct an independent and thorough examination of the current state of human rights in Ethiopia. On March 9th of this year, the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations held a hearing to discuss specific steps the United States can take to bring about positive changes for the Ethiopian government and their people. Among those who testified was Deacon Joseph Tafari of the St. Mary's Ethiopian Orthodox Church located in Aurora, Colorado. Deacon Joseph was raised in Ethiopia and has experienced the daily struggles many Ethiopians have faced living in abject poverty under an oppressive government. Deacon Joseph fled from Ethiopia in 1976 and came to the United States as a refugee. He and many of the members of the Ethiopian community in my congressional district of Colorado, including the Oromo and Amaras, have worked diligently to organize and assist those still suffering from repression in their home country. Oromo Community President of Colorado, Jamal Syed, has also shared his concerns with me, and both of these gentlemen have no motives other than a concern about the safety and state of democracy in Ethiopia. I appreciate their leadership in the community as they continue to fight for democracy in their homeland. Unfortunately, stories like this are not uncommon in my district, and I am disappointed that the House has not yet scheduled a floor vote on House Resolution 128. I note that on two prior occasions a vote was tentatively scheduled. In both of these instances, it is my understanding that the vote was postponed due to pressure from the Ethiopian government, who continues to make promises to curb human rights abuses against their own people, but failed to deliver. Additionally, it has been brought to my attention that the Ethiopian government has threatened to cut off security cooperation with the United States should we proceed with House Resolution 128. I am particularly dismayed that rather than solving their problems and moving towards becoming a more democratic country, the Ethiopian government has chosen instead to hire a D.C. lobbying firm at a cost of $150,000 a month to, quote, work with the Ethiopian government to develop and execute a public affairs plan to enhance the dialogue and relationships with policymakers, media, opinion leaders, and business leaders, unquote. In addition to, quote, meetings with members of Congress, their staffs, and executive branch officials, unquote. The issue the Ethiopian government needs to address is the repression of democracy and its citizens in Ethiopia. The solution to whatever negative perception it has in the halls of the U.S. Congress is not a public affairs one, but rather what concrete steps are being taken against democracy in Ethiopia. That is why I remain committed to working with House leadership to have a vote scheduled on House Resolution 128. Mr. Speaker, I encourage leadership to schedule a vote, and I call on my colleagues to vote in favor and pass House Resolution 128. I will continue working with local Ethiopian community leaders in Colorado and across the country to raise awareness of the human rights abuses occurring in Ethiopia and to bring relief from oppression to the Ethiopian people. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.